If I hear about the parting of the Red Sea one more time, I'll stuff these tablets down his throat.
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Grimerica show. With me, as always, my co-host Graham. How's it going, Graham?
I'm doing pretty good. Looking forward to talking to Red Pill Junkie.
Yeah, we've got Red Pill Junkie here now, and of course we'll have Scotty Roberts coming up a little later on. But for now, let's deal with the man of the hour. How's it going, RPJ?
Hey guys, how are you? How's the weather treating you?
Well, we've both managed to stay pretty dry. There's about 100,000 people downtown that are displaced right now, but the Grimerica studio is nice and dry.
Yeah, there's a big flood here in Calgary, and I had to take about a 50-kilometer detour to get here. So it's pretty strange seeing a city full of water like this.
Well, I get a feeling that we will all have to cope with these kind of disasters on a more regular basis in the years to come, you know?
Yeah, it's almost like the planet is changing. Well, the climate is obviously changing. There's obviously some discrepancies between people saying who's changing the climate or why it's changing. But irregardless of that, something is definitely happening, and there's going to be some changes in our future.
Yeah, I want to say, too, before I forget, that our thoughts and prayers go out to those who have been displaced here in Calgary.
Hopefully everyone found a nice warm place to stay. I actually heard this morning that out of the 100,000 people that were displaced, only 1,500 needed emergency shelters at the rec centers, and the rest were all put up with friends or family. So that's a glimpse into the good side of humanity.
Yeah, that's good. Good to hear.
Yeah, and we can always put up some link where people can visit the Grimerica site, and if they want to donate some money to the Red Cross or whatever, you know.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that, actually. That's a good idea here for the next. I'm pretty sure they were saying it's going to probably around $500 million in damage so far, but I'd imagine that's going to go up quite a bit. But I understand you guys have some water issues yourself down there.
Yeah, we've had some issues with this tropical storm Barry, which has caused us a lot of damage in southeastern states, Veracruz, Tabasco. All these places are suffering a lot of problems because the roads get blocked and people are get trapped and have to be evacuated by the army.
I read the Red Pills this week. They were great as always. Can you fill us in a little bit there? What the top stories are in the fringe and Fortiana world?
Sure. Well, speaking about the southeast of Mexico, last week was a great week for archaeology fans because there was a lot of very interesting findings. One was made in Cambodia when the archaeologists found a lost city covered deep in the jungle. I think that this city was referred in some legends and some folkloric tradition, but up until now, nobody really knew of its existence. Archaeologists managed to find another great Maya city. Yes, they call this new archaeological site Chactún, which means red stone, I think. It's very interesting. The archaeologists say that this city is from what they call the late classic, which is like 1,400 years old, apparently. And it's in pristine state. Nobody knew of its existence, and that's great because then you can dismiss the threat of looting by dig robbers, right?
Yeah, for sure. So was it just in the jungle or was it buried?
Well, not exactly buried, but it was covered by trees, outgrowth, and all that, you know. I think how they managed to locate it was through aerial surveillance. And the plane they used, it was also equipped with LiDAR scanners. And the LiDAR scanners managed to give a rough reference of the city's layout. It's a very wide city, by the way.
Yeah, I heard about that. That's some new. That's their new method. It involves lasers in some way, doesn't it? And they say it's going to revolutionize looking for these lost cities in the jungle.
Yes, most definitely. The places that you can barely see any traces of human activity. With the help of these new technologies, you can. It's like an X-ray vision or something. you can get rid of the vegetation that is covering the archaeological sites. And it definitely will bring about a new era of archaeological discoveries. Some of my friends in the United States say that this will be really helpful. Cover of new burial mounds that are scattered all around the United States territory, that maybe for political reasons of lack of resources have never had been the chance to be studied deeply.
Do you know if that can be used over water eventually? Like to maybe go over the areas where supposed, Atlantis and all these other underwater cities are?
That's a good question. I'm not sure, but I kind of doubt it because after all, laser is a form of coherent light, and water scatters light, right? So maybe with underwater constructions, underwater archaeological remains, we will have to make use of other types of technology like sonar scanners.
But we can still find fucking El Dorado.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, I think that a month ago, archaeologists had said that they had discovered a city called the White City, La Ciudad Blanca. I think it was in Bolivia or Colombia. I'm not sure right now. But it's a very interesting, a very exciting announcement because this city had been sought out by the Spanish conquistadores 500 years ago, and nobody managed to find it. So it's kind of a legendary place. In other news, it was also a very interesting, exciting day for Mars fans. There was an article published on the Guardian that told about that scientists have finally found evidence that Mars' atmosphere had once been filled with oxygen. 1 billion years before Earth managed to have oxygen in its atmosphere.
Yeah, so that totally lends to the fact that to me that's a huge supporter of the panspermia theory.
Definitely, most definitely. It's another important discovery hinting to the fact that Mars once had an habitable environment and was more than likely contained life. But this. Scientists are still trying to be conservative about it. They are not really sure if Mars was the product of biological activity as it was here on Earth in the history of our planet. The oxygen we now breathe was produced by the algae on the oceans. And even it's interesting to note that I don't remember, 500 million years ago, or maybe even before, when the algae started to produce oxygen is really a very corrosive gas. So it was like if the atmosphere was started to fill with poison. And so it provoked a huge die-out of the very primitive multicellular organisms that were starting to develop on our planet. But eventually, life managed to adapt to the presence of oxygens, and now we humans and most of the animals and plant life existing in our planet depend on oxygen.
Yeah, now we'll end up once we finish fucking up the Earth, we'll just head right back to Mars, and it's just like a vicious fucking cycle.
Oh, great. Now Darren's going to get his Mars 1 kick here.
No, I'm good with Mars 1.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm going to lay off Mars 1 for a while. I emailed him again for an interview, but I got no reply. He has done a few interviews, though. There's a few out there on YouTube you can find.
I'm in the middle of my application process right now.
Really? Have you produced your video yet?
I'm working on it. I'm just doing the written application. I've paid my $40 and I'm getting ready to do the video.
I'll shoot the video if you need. So what do you think about that? The Chinese farmer going to jail there.
Farmer, the one who faked the rubber alien?
Yeah. Didn't he end up in jail now?
Maybe he went to jail for a couple of days, but I mean, it was mostly harmless. Nobody is stupid was stupid enough to fall for that, and it was almost sad.
Yeah, I see here. Actually, he only got five days.
Okay, well, 5 days, and hopefully he will learn his lessons, because in this field, I think there's nothing more dangerous than a well-intentioned idiot. But it's interesting that you mentioned China, because another of the news that caught my attention this week is this one reported by RT that says that China has issued the penalty of execution for environmental polluters.
Whoa. They're not fucking around.
Yeah, how about that? You know, they have reached that point, and they have to threaten people with the death penalty if they pollute their environment.
Yeah, well, I guess that's a huge problem over there.
Yeah, surely. I mean, here in Mexico, we have our own problems with the environment. In Mexico, just today, I had to take my car to be what we call verified. What it is that if you own a car, and if you want to drive the car through the city, you have to make sure that the emissions that are expelled by your motor are not don't have an excess of pollutants. No, so they have to go check the ozone and the carbon dioxide emissions. And if the emissions are within the limits, then they give you your seal and you are free to use your car. And if they don't, then you have to go take your car to the shop and take it to a tune-up or whatever. And then so you have the freedom to use your own car on the streets of the city. It was a measure that was issued about 20 years ago because of the amount of the what we call Grimeica, the level of carbon dioxide on the atmosphere that was reaching very dangerous levels. And because of that, the order was issued that private cars will have to be not used one day of the week, what we call hoy no circula. It's a measure that I'm sure our American friends will find I don't know, totalitarian.
Yeah, we do that in Canada, in some parts of Canada too. I know in BC, British Columbia, there's an air care required every 2 years. But people have kind of figured out ways to get through it a little easier, like running your car hard for 20 minutes before you go in, that type of thing. And apparently it almost guarantees you're going to pass.
Yeah, and what happened here in Mexico is that people who could afford it bought a second car to use when your main car had to stay home. So in the end, the measure aggravated to go around the law, you know?
Yeah, I don't think in Canada we've ever had a day of the week you couldn't drive. So is that like a certain day, or is it just like everyone has a different day, or you pick your own day?
Yeah, everyone has a different day depending of the number at the end of your license plate. You know, if you are 9, then you have to stay home on Friday. If your number is 8, then you have to stay home Thursday, right?
What number have you got?
0. But my car is not 10 years old yet, so that means that I can use it every day of the week. That's the other thing, that they agree that newer cars were exempt of this program, even though recently there's been talk that they are discussing that maybe in the future, even the newer cars will have to stick to the program and not be used one day of the week, which will be, I don't know, I think it won't solve the problem. It will make it even worse.
Yeah, I guess they've got good intentions, but I don't see that working. It's got to be done different than that, I suppose. They just really need to go over. It's just a matter of time till we go over to fully electric, I think, anyway.
Yeah, I think so too. And the problem is that even if the private cars who have tuned up motors staying home, all the buses and trucks who are spewing huge amounts of smog, they are free to drive all day. So that's really unfair for the middle class tax-paying working man who needs to find a way to go to his work or take his or her kids to school, where meanwhile the city allows protesters to block the streets and cause huge traffic jams, which eventually obviously will create a huge amounts of pollution. It's really. It's more of a political problem than an environmental one.
Yeah, well, we've got major traffic problems here in Calgary right now, but I mean, I've seen a few of the pictures you've sent me. We've got nothing compared to some of the traffic that's roaming around in that city.
Yeah, I mean, you really don't know what a traffic jam is until you live it here in Mexico City, believe me.
Is that the worst in the world? I heard there was a place in Sweden that was maybe a little worse, but I'm pretty sure Mexico City is one of the worst places.
I'm sure that Mexico City is at the top 5. I mean, I've read about some problems in Russia. I think a traffic jam that lasted like 5 days. But here in Mexico, you are guaranteed to have traffic jams every day of the week. The only time you don't have traffic is during the holidays when most of the people are out of the city.
Yeah, so what's your average commute like then?
Recently, we changed our office to a place that's closer to my home. So now my average commute time is like 40 minutes, which is a really a huge improvement over what I used to endure for the past 10 years.
How long do you take in the morning, Graham? Must take you a while right now.
Mine's about 35 minutes maybe. Depends on trains and traffic and stuff. But yeah, usually 30 to 40 minutes. Gives me enough time to listen to the latest podcast.
Yeah, that's the one good thing about traffic, I guess. It used to be a lot worse.
Yeah, now with the podcast, sometimes you wish to extend your commute so you can finish the last podcast.
Yeah. So are you getting ready for another Red Pills of the Week here?
No. Tomorrow.
Anything? Can you have any sneak peeks?
Yes. I mean, I think that the most important news of the week was the end of what is called the British UFO files. The British government finally released the last batch of its official UFO files to the public, ending a 50-year span of time when they were interested in officially study and investigate UFO reports. But as you may probably know, what they call the weird desk of the UFO files desk was closed in 2009.
Is there any sort of form of MUFON or public program over there in UK?
Well, I think there's a few independent UFO groups like in the United States. Maybe MUFON has a UK branch. Remember, there was this other group. Their acronym was ASAP or ASSAP. The ones who said last year that there was no point to studying UFOs.
Oh yeah, that's right. They said there was no phenomena.
Yeah, I mean, it was so stupid because the reason they say that did any UFO case in our website, and I remember that Ben and Aaron said, well, maybe because your website is a piece of crap and nobody's interested in wasting their time writing something there, because 2012 was a huge year in UFO activity. Another problem is that now that the United Kingdom is closing their UFO desk, the citizens will not have a place to go.
I'm on the ASAP website right now, actually.
I remember that I checked it out last year, and it was a very disappointing place. I mean, it's the typical UFO apologist. I don't know. I think there's something about British ufologists, right? They're much more skeptics than their American counterparts. If you go to the blog of Dr. David Clark, who is the one who has been most involved with the release of the UFO British files, you can read that the fact that some of these sightings are reported by helicopter pilots, soldiers, and police officers underlies how even so-called credible witnesses can be mistaken about things they have seen in the sky. I mean, you read that and you go, man, hello. I mean, have you even bothered to read Leslie King's book?
Yeah. So what do you think causes that? Or can you attribute something to that? The culture in the UK, or?
I mean, I don't want to go on the conspiracy line here. I mean, there are some people who have accused Clark of being a UFO disinformant. I don't want to go there. I think that it's just a refusal to see the. I mean, the UK has concluded that the UFOs do not represent a threat to the United Kingdom, but maybe they are not taking into account the case of the Rendlesham Forest in the 1980s, when a UFO managed to cause quite a stir inside one of the most important and sensitive military installations in their own country. And according to Colonel Charles Halt, the UFO managed to adversely affect the integrity of nuclear weapons. I mean, if that is not a matter of national defense, then I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it blows me away that we're still dealing with this denial that there's a genuine phenomena.
Well, maybe the UK just figures that between the States and Russia, they don't need to waste their money.
Maybe. I mean,
and China.
But I don't know. I think the problem when you closed official avenues is that someone will eventually fill that gap, and then that gap is easily filled by people who really don't have maybe the skills or the appropriate methodology to study the UFO phenomenon. Last week, I read about how many people were mocking a documentary that was aired on UK's Channel 4. It was called Confessions of an Alien Abductee. And I even mentioned it on the last Red Pills of the Week about a woman named Chantel, who claims to be the most abducted woman in the United Kingdom. And you look at this woman, and it's very difficult not to not to try to make fun of her. I mean, just by her physical appearance. I mean, the hairdo she used, I admit that I couldn't resist making some comment that maybe the cone head was getting sloppy.
Looks like she's right out of the 40s or the 50s.
Well, they got to find the fucking craziest looking one.
Yes, that's the problem, because they are always looking for the oddballs, you know? The media is always paying attention to the ones with the craziest ideas, or the ones who the most extravagant. They never pay attention to people who have good jobs, who have a stable social life, and who also claim to have the abduction experience. And on the other hand, maybe the reason they don't focus on those people is because those people prefer to keep their experiences private. They don't go around claiming to be an alien abductee, because they know the minute they go to the public with those claims, they will be ridiculed.
Yeah, there seems to be that giggle factor. Like, there's really not much you can do about that. I know if I brought it up in like my circles, I'd probably get the same thing.
Yeah,
I've never been abducted, but you know what I mean.
Let's play a tiny clip here.
Perfect.
Just to see what it sounds like.
Levitating up, and it's like after that I can't remember anything. It must have levitated up to here, and I seen something go shoot past. I seen it with corner of my eye first, and I thought, oh, what was that? It just went boom, straight past me, just glowing like a neon blue colour, white, and sometimes changing into a gold colour. They were only about that size.
And were you scared?
No, little tiny orbs.
No. Yeah, it can be a scary experience, and it's also an amazing experience.
You say you want this to stop, but I'm not sure you really do, Shanti.
No, I don't think I do, to be honest. If they do stop, I'd miss it, basically. They're like...
Stockholm
if they stopped
Syndrome.
abducting me, I'd probably miss them, really, because to me, they're like part of my family.
Huh, interesting.
So was that the actual chick?
Yeah.
Good score.
And I think that she said that the last time she was abducted, she was just eating at KFC.
So do you have any little teasers for this week's Red Pills before we? Well, I guess by the time people hear it, it'll be out.
Well, two more before we wrap this up, because I have to go in a minute. The one is it was a sad news for the people, the community, of the passing of Michael Bagent. I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. He was important because he wrote this very influential book, Holy Blood and Holy Grail, which eventually influenced Dan Brown and in the writing of the famous Da Vinci Code. And because of the Da Vinci Code, the idea of that maybe Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene, and the Grail referred to his blood lineage, who was done through Jesus' daughter, and then through a line of French kings called the Merovingians. Well, all these ideas started thanks to Michael Bagent.
That's how old was he?
Late 60s or early 70s, I think. I think that the problem is that he started to suffer a lot of health issues because of a very painful litigation problems he had when he and his partners went out to sue Dan Brown. They alleged that Dan Brown had infringed in copyright infringements when writing the Da Vinci Code. But in the end, Dan Brown managed to win, and Bagent and his partner were forced to pay a huge debt. They were forced to pay the publishing companies of Dan Brown. I think it's about the legal fees, which amounted to, I don't know, a lot of money. And after that, Michael Bajan started to suffer a lot of health issues.
Yeah, stress will do that to you.
Yeah, exactly. And finally, we also have one of the most important news that was commented this week was a documentary about TWA Flight 800. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was a plane crash that happened in 1996. And after a 4-year investigation, the Federal Aviation Agency concluded that the crash was the result of an internal fire. That was, it was an accident.
Mechanical error.
Exactly. And with this new documentary, they are again raising the theory that the plane was brought down by a missile, that it was a terrorist attack.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And the producers of the film are pleading to the United States government to reopen the case and to look again at the new evidence that they have apparently uncovered. And it's an interesting idea. I suppose it's something like that happened to now again in the years 2013. Many more people will be supporting, will suspect a terrorist attack.
Yeah, you'd think someone would have claimed it, though.
Yeah, well, back in those days, I remember. There were people who witnessed the plane going down. They said that according to them, that they saw like a small line of light crossing the sky and hitting the plane.
So were they? Maybe it was a UFO.
No, not that I know of. And maybe in those days, some ufologists might have wondered if it was the result of a UFO, but I don't think that idea caught. I think that the two leading hypotheses is it was either a malfunction or it was a terrorist attack.
Well, when's the documentary supposed to come out? Is it out already?
I think it's out already.
What did you say it was called again? We'll make sure we link to it.
I tried to find the name of the documentary and I couldn't find it. But maybe it's about TWA Flight 18 or something.
Yeah, Graham will track it down. He's a pro.
Perfect. Well, that's all I have for this week, guys.
Okay, RPJ. Well, thanks a lot for coming on, and we'll probably see you next month.
Perfect.
Yeah, thanks a lot, RPJ.
Thank you, guys, and see you around. And goodbye to all people listening. Thanks to stopping by.
Okay, big thanks to RPJ for stopping by again. We're going to take a quick break, guys, and we'll be right back with our interview with Scotty Roberts. Okay, guys, welcome back to the Grimerica show, and as promised, we're going to be talking with Scotty Roberts tonight. First, with me as always is Graham. How's it going tonight, Graham?
Hey, I'm doing really good. I'm feeling better. Had my yoga last night that I've been missing, so I'm feeling pretty good. So tonight we have Scotty Roberts here, who's the founder, publisher of Intrepid Mag. He's also the organizer or co-organizer of Paradigm Symposium. That's coming up in October 2013. And also he's been the author of at least 2 books there, The Rise and Fall of the Nephilim and the secret history of the Reptilians. And we're going to be talking about his another book, his new book coming out.
Exodus, I think it's called, eh?
No, it's called The Exodus Reality, I believe.
Oh. Well, we'll let Scotty will tell us all about it, I'm sure. How's it going tonight, Scotty?
Excellent, guys. Thanks for having me on. Yeah,
we're glad to have you. Glad you could come through for us. So, I don't know where to start, really. I suppose let's start maybe with your work with Intrepid Magazine.
Sure. I can take it back a step from that. I worked as the editor-in-chief for TAPS Paramag, which is the Ghost Hunters from Sci-Fi, their official magazine. And when I was brought on there, I was asked what my vision for that magazine was. And I said, I think you guys need to keep the fan base and appeal to the fans as a fanzine for Ghost Hunters and their various shows. I said, but expand a little bit. You're going to find people that don't give two shits about ghost hunting that'll want to pick up your magazine if it has other content in it. And they said, fantastic. Let's do it. And I said, we got to move into tech. I said, let's get an app and let's get the website refurbished and all of this. And I kept, without being critical of them, I understood their viewpoint. I kept getting halted on it. You know, we got to walk before we can run. We got to do this. And I said, after about a year and a half of that, I said, you know, guys, I reproposed everything I started at the beginning, and it just didn't get accepted again. It was just, we got to wait. And I said, well, look, we're going to walk ourselves into non-existence if we're not careful. So there were other things that we disagreed on, and we had some disputes over some things, but we parted as friends and left it that way. And the very next day, which was December 29th of 2010, I founded Intrepid Magazine. And I said, now I am going to do a magazine that does basically what I want and what I like. And if people ask me, what's Intrepid all about? I say, it's the stuff I like. And that's what we do. We do politics. We do science. We do fringe science. We do metaphysics, ufology, ancient aliens or paleo contact. We do history, archaeology, psychology at times. And sometimes we delve into even the paranormal. I try to avoid the paranormal a bit per se, but they do overlap. Nowadays, where they used to be concentric circles that would never touch each other, repelled each other, as a matter of fact. Now they're crossing over in many areas. So that makes it very easy for me and my writers. We are a digital magazine, meaning I lay the magazine out exactly as if we were going to print and paper, but we burn it to PDF and we release it that way to people. We're working up to get to a print magazine where everybody says because the technology is so high that print is dead. And you know what? I don't believe that for a minute. I have so many people that say, well, I'll order your magazine as soon as you come out and print. And so print will never die. It's just the advent of technology, and the more technologically we grow, and of course, as the newer generation comes up, that's going to be more and more proliferated. So right now, we're just a digital magazine. We printed one print magazine, and that was, you saw it at the Paradigm Symposium last year. We printed an issue and doubled it up and used it as the program for the event as well. So that's where Intrepid came. We are entering our third year of publication. We started publishing issue 1 in April of 2011, and we're now in June of 2013, which is only 2 years out, but we've begun our third year. So Micah Hanks, as you all know, works with me on the magazine, and he is my technical advisor. He is my editor-in-chief, and he supplies fantastic articles for me and himself, and he's an asset to what we do.
Yeah, Grimerica actually has a copy of your print Intrepid magazine. We've actually got it autographed by, I think, everybody in the lineup.
Oh, fantastic. We had quite a lineup at Paradigm Symposium last year. We had Eric von Daniken, who wrote Chariots of the Gods 40 years ago, and 33 now books since then. We had the whole cast of Ancient Aliens, Giorgio Tsoukalos, Philip Coppens, and very sad to say, the late Philip Coppens. We had Bill Burns was supposed to be there, and a week before the event, he had to cancel. He had some commitments he could not get out of. And so he couldn't make it. But we had George Norrie from Coast to Coast Radio, Ian Punnett, who did the weekend Coast to Coast and does a daily show up here in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. and a bunch of authors that you all know. And it was, in my estimation, I had said to Micah ahead of time, I said, even if we don't break even on this event, if I will consider it a success if people, as they're walking out the door on Sunday afternoon, say, that was amazing, I can't wait till next year.
Yeah, and it was.
That's exactly what happened.
And you and Micah did such a great job hosting it, just doing and keeping everything on schedule, and the way you guys would introduce all the people and do your little show there, your little stand-up show. I mean,
yeah.
And you guys were so approachable. I had a really, really good time just meeting everybody and talking to everybody, all these open-minded people. So we're really looking forward to the next one.
Micah and I said last year, we had talked originally about, do we need to script anything for this? And I said, and we both agreed, no, we don't need to script this. We need to just go up and be ourselves. And our job is to keep the energy high, keep people happy, be excited to be there. And so that's what we did. Between every speaker, we just got on the mics and walked up and said, let's stay excited. And I got to tell you, my adrenaline dropped to below zero the moment that event ended. And I said, see you next year, folks. I turned off the mic and I just went, and I was gone because I was running on high octane all weekend. And so it was a fantastic event even for us. And I will say we garner mild criticism every now and then because of the price of our tickets. We run from $250 on the low side to $450 on the high side for the packages. And people say, boy, that's an awful lot. Or somebody said, wow, another event for the rich. And I said, and I said publicly to people, I said, these things cost a hell of a lot of money to put on. I would say, and I got no problem releasing this, we probably spent about $80,000 last year putting that event on. And we didn't take in $80,000. So we didn't break even last year, but we measured the success of this by the way that people reacted and said, we're digging deep in our pockets to still pay for last year, but let's move ahead and do next year. And we've got a fantastic lineup this year. And we've got Scott Walter from H2's America Unearthed. We've got Robert Bauval, Egyptologist. He's been on Ancient Aliens. You've seen him on every Egyptological show, documentary on the TV, I think. We've got L.A. Marzulli, who wrote the best-selling Nephilim series and is doing a series of videos on the Watchers. We've got Dr. Robert Schock, who wrote the book on the water damage on the Sphinx. He's a Boston University professor and a geologist, I think is his official title. And we've got a couple of people yet, even only just under 4 months out, we've still got a couple of people who have expressed interest, and we're waiting for their commitment to it. One of them is, if you've heard of him, Shimka Yakubovici. We hope to land him in. He was on History International before it became H2, and he had a show called The Naked Archaeologist.
Oh,
and a fantastic show. We've got a couple of other people that are going to be there speaking that'll be surprised. We've got Dr. John DeSalvo, who was kind of we fit him in last year because he was there at one of the author tables, Inner Traditions.
Yeah, he was Crystal Skulls, eh?
Yes, and he's coming as an official speaker this year. And by the way, his publisher, Inner Traditions, is our biggest sponsor this year. So we're going to be doing a lot of pumping of Inner Traditions and their authors. We've got a couple of their authors right now.
Yeah, you can pump Inner Traditions tires all you want here because we've got a pretty good relationship with them as well. They've provided us with a few books and a few interviews and the whole nine yards. They've got absolutely fantastic people over there.
Yeah, fantastic. I work with John Hayes and Maria Murray, I think her last name is. And I would hate for her to hear that I can't remember her last name, but we have a great rapport. So, and we've got a ton of sponsors this year, and some of them come on financially and help you. Some of them come on and help promote you in exchange for sponsorship. And so it's expensive putting these things on, and we make no bones about it. And so, but we want to put on the best event possible.
So does that mean you guys even have room to talk yourselves? Are you going to be speaking? And Micah?
Yes, Micah will be speaking. We both spoke last year.
Yeah.
And I will be speaking with Dr. Ward on our book, The Exodus Reality, this year. And that will be a lot of fun.
Are you going to have a scarf donned for that?
I will probably have a scarf. Now, I hope John isn't listening to this. I've got a special present for him. I hope to give him before the event. He doesn't know about it. So I can't say, just in case he listens. So,
well, hopefully he will.
Yeah, I can't wait to see Dr. Ward again. He was it's just fantastic chats we had with him over cigarettes.
Oh, he's an amazing man, and I got to tell you, I'm a guy, and I have no problem saying this. I love John Ward dearly. He is a dear friend. I rank him up there with Micah. These are two men in my life that I say I love these people with all my heart, and I love them dearly. And spending a month with John, and Maria tagged along on a lot of the things that we did. His fiancée, she is also his associate with their project, the Sirius project, and they work the quarries of Gebel El Silsila under permission by the Department of Antiquities, and they catalog epigraphic survey and symbolism and things like that. And but we spending a month with him, just going from place to place to place to place, was amazing, and his connections got us into places that people don't get to go. Of course, we saw the touristy things, and we got into things that most people can pay to get in at the gate and see a temple or something. But we were taken. Here's a good example for you. We drove over to the Sinai to see a little mountain that we both believe is the holy mountain of God mentioned in the book of Exodus, Mount Sinai. And at least it's a very high candidate for this mountain. And we drove over the northern tip of the left finger of the Red Sea, and through under the Suez Canal in a tunnel, and we were put up as guests of Sheikh Barakat of the region there, and there's nothing there. His village is there, which isn't big at all. It's a few houses, and we slept in a Bedouin tent on the desert floor that night. The sheikh and his kids and his wives all came down with trays full of food for us, had a fire going inside the tent. His adult sons, I got up in the middle of the night to just go see the full moon, because there I am in the middle of the Sinai, in the middle of nowhere, these craggy mountains all around me, and the desert and the wilderness all around me, and here are these two, in the moonlight, these two young men sleeping, all wrapped up in camel hair blankets, sleeping outside our tent, about 20 feet from the tent in either direction, guarding us for the night. And but we walked up the mountain the next day and visited the ruins of the Temple of Hathor up there. And it's about 4,000-year-old temple. And Hathor being the cow goddess of Egypt, start right away in your head associating what happened when the Israelites were waiting for Moses to come down from the mountain, and they built the altar to the golden calf, which is Hathor. And it was that's one of the biggest connectivities we found of that place. And it's mentioned in the biblical terms as one of the stopping points along the way. And so we placed this, as did Petrie, a famous archaeologist of the late 18th century, or 19th century, called this mountain Mount Sinai. And he was, of course, taken down for that academically. But anyway, that was the mountain. But what I was going to say about that is one of John's connections had a man meet us there by the name of Mustafa Rezik. And Mustafa Rezik showed up in his jeans. He's an Egyptian man, jeans and tennis shoes, and guided us up the mountain path. And it ends up that he is they call him a guardian, but he was the director of all of Sinai for the government of Egypt and the Department of Antiquities. And here's this guy in his tennis shoes hiking up the mountain with us. We were sitting in the tent that night before, and he asked what my theory was on Moses and why this mountain was important. So I gave him about the 5-minute rundown, and he leans into me over the fire, and he says, "I have a surprise for you at the mountaintop." And he showed me some steles that had the characters that I associate with my character Moses up at the top. some things, and I can get into this a little later if you want to, but some things where they are Hatshepsut and Tutmosis III, her stepson, who they were co-regents at the time that I believe Moses was in power in Egypt, and her images were all wiped out after her death. And this is the only place, one of the only places you can find this stele, which was cracked off at the top. So you've got the arched top of this stele. It looks like a tombstone, and it's got her image facing Osiris and Tutmosis III's image facing Hathor, and above both of their names are the hieroglyph for the king of Egypt. So this is the one place where you can find, that I know of, where you can find inscriptions that show them both as co-kings of Egypt before she deposed him and took over as pharaoh.
Wow.
So that was interesting. Then when we were down in Luxor, same kind of guy down there, a friend of John's, Momin Saad. He is the director of Egyptian antiquities for all of Luxor. And we sat for coffee. He asked me the same question, my theories and so on. And he says, well, what would you like to see at the temple of complex of Karnak? And I said, I can get you a list. I gave him a list of 23 things I needed to see. He spent a whole day just walking us around Karnak, pointing out all the different things and all the different pylons and all the different temples inside the complex pertaining to this. And he also got us up into one of the tombs that people just don't get to go see up above Hatshepsut's big temple that's in the cliff face, Deir el Bahri. And way up in the cliff face is one of the tombs of Senenmut, which was a workers' station 3,500 years ago when they were building her temple. And there's pornographic graffiti dating back to that time period on the wall showing Senenmut shagging Hatshepsut.
Wow.
Or as John would say, he says, "Oh, Scotty, that's Senenmut rogering Hatshepsut." So,
that reminds me of the cliffside caves in the Valley of the Kings. I was in Egypt in 1990 for a month, and we got to go up there. We had to give baksheesh to the little boys up there on the middle of the cliff, but those little caves, you could jump in and climb all the way down into the bones. And I remember breaking a flip-flop off and having to walk through it all in my bare feet. It was
nice.
Yeah, very strange. So when you guys were down there talking to this director of antiquities, did the fact that Zahi Hawass is no longer there, did you guys talk about any changes that are happening, or did you get a feeling that things were opening up at all down there?
You know, that didn't come up. Zahi Hawass didn't come up except between John and I. Just some conversation about some of his experiences with him, which he said were very superficial years ago. But John noted especially the way things have changed since the revolution. And one of those is that it has empowered the people. The positive is, you can't be against people trying to make a living and doing it any way they want to. That's just pure and simple entrepreneurship. But one thing John really saddened John, and that I noticed, was how overrun the major sites are by people trying to sell you shit.
Yeah,
and
from Mexico, the sites in Mexico were the same way. I was just down there a few months ago, and it's fun at first, but after a while it gets old.
John taught me a little phrase that meant no thank you, and it was la shukran. And he said you can say it politely, la shukran, or you can go la shukran, tone of voice. It's like, get out of my face. I have never had vendors before, as I walk by and I say, no, thank you. And I say, no, thank you, a dozen times as they follow me, grab me by the arm and turn me around and say, why you not buy from me? And I say, because I don't want it. It's cheap. John made no bones about it. He says, that's not, what's the black stone? Not onyx. No. The
tourmaline?
Obsidian or something like
Obsidian?
No, I can't remember what it is. These basalt.
Oh, yeah.
Basalt statues. They're trying to sell you basalt statues. And John would pick it up and he'd say, that's light as a feather. He says, that's resin. That's resin. And he'd say, bring me something basalt and we can talk. And so, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. At times it got aggravating because it was relentless at some places. and you could almost not enjoy being there because you were surrounded all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the byproducts of a people who have never had the opportunity like this before.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Did you make it all the way down to Aswan?
We did not.
And
We
to
were
Abu
going
Simbel?
to. We were going to, and we only got as far as Silsila, which I think is about halfway between Luxor and Aswan.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the site where John and Maria do their excavation.
Oh,
with
right.
the quarries down there. And we were actually on the west bank of the quarries. We were going through cliff face. People would call them tombs. They're open. You can find some brilliant color left in some of these. But we have to crawl along these cliff faces, and it's not really all that high. But if you fall off of one of those cliff faces and fall, 3 meters to the ground on a rock or into the Nile, it's going to hurt. So we weren't all that high. It's not like we were aerial, but we're crawling along these cliff faces, sometimes bent over a little backwards, hugging the wall, and getting into some of these spiases, these little shrines. And we found the shrine of Senenmut, the shrine of Hatshepsut. John found the shrine of Amenhotep III and Amenhotep, son of Hapu. By the way, John and I, in this book, we present two different views of Moses and who the people were around him, separated by about 80 years, 2 generations in the pharaonic line. He places his under Amenhotep III. I place mine under Amenhotep II, the grandfather of Amenhotep III. And so we, while we differed on that, we wrote our book, and we have when we talk about it, we have a nice little repartee that goes back and forth. John will say, he says, "Oh, Scotty," he says, "your theory is amazing. It's just too bad it's so full of holes." And I would retort with, "Well, what do you know? You just dig in the sand. I read books." And but we've come closer and closer to each other's theories, meaning we are pretty set on our theories, but we see the value and the efficacy, and frankly, we both see the points of history that could make either one of these be an accurate one, but we both hold to our certain viewpoints for certain reasons. And but when it comes to Sarabat el-Khadim and the Mountain of God, we're pretty much right on the same page there.
Is that the same mountain that's directly opposite of Roswell?
No. That would be in my book, The Rise and Fall of the Nephilim. I wrote about how the book of Enoch, while the book of Genesis only mentions 4 verses about the Nephilim, and hardly any mention at all, they don't cast judgment pro or con. It's just a mention, and it's a prelude to the flood of Noah story. If you go to the book of Enoch, which has 11 chapters or more dedicated to the Watchers and the Nephilim, he talks about how they came down to the slopes of Mount Armon, which is current-day Mount Hermon. And it's in the north of what used to be the north of Israel. Now that's of course, this mountain straddles Syria and Lebanon, a very highly politicized area, the Golan Heights.
Yeah.
And but this mountain lies on the 33rd parallel north of the equator. And if you trace the 33rd parallel all around to the very opposite spot on the other side of the planet, you end up very close to the crash site of Roswell, New Mexico. And of course, Bill Burns was the one who told me, and I quoted him in the book, as saying he believed this is some kind of way line or ley line even, that connects how the Earth is covered with this grid of all these connectivities between all these temple sites and important sites of antiquity and theoretical sites connected with the ancient alien hypothesis, things like that. And so, that's that mountain. It talks about how 200 prefects from heaven came down and settled on the slopes of Mount Hermon and made a pact to go into human women and intermingle with them and breed with them. And actually, it's painted sometimes in a very negative light, but the way it talks about it in that passage, it says they fell in love with them. They chose whomever they chose. They chose these people. They cohabited with them. And they brought to them the forbidden knowledge of God. And they taught them things. That doesn't sound like a hostile takeover. But this is the way that the mythology works there. And I've got to say for the record, where the Nephilim are not the ones who descended. They're the offspring of those who did. And in the biblical passage, it refers to the beings who came down as the sons of God, came down and intermingled with the daughters of men and had children by them. And the sons of God in the Hebrew is the B'nai Ha-Elohim. And this is the sons of the Elohim, or those who are of the God of many gods, as Elohim is defined. And by the way, the word Elohim is the name for God used almost 3,000 times in the Old Testament, and it means literally God of or God among many gods. And El being the name of God in the Hebrew or the Canaanite language, and Him being the plural suffix in Hebrew tacked onto a word to denote plurality. Just like Nephilim, the word is Nephal, and you put Ib, the Him on the end, it's Nephalhim, those who came down, those who left their first estate and came to another, and so on. And so I find it very interesting that the beings who came down, and by the way, Enoch refers to them as the Watchers. They're also referred to as the Watchers in the book of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar the king, the Watchers appeared to him. These Watchers are not angels. People for many centuries had interpreted this as angels. The problem with that, these beings who came down, they're not angels because the word angel never appears in the text anywhere. And that is the word melach, or for plural melachi, and or melachim. And these, it's never used. They are called B'nai Ha-Elohim. And these are the sons of the Elohim. And if you go to, in a Bible, pick up a Bible and go to Psalm 82. And in the English, replace the word God and gods with the actual word in the Hebrew, which is Elohim. And it reads this way. It says, and Elohim stood in the midst of the Elohim, the singular and the plural. And he, singular, said to them, plural, you are all Elohim, the bright shining princes of heaven. And then he goes to pass judgment on them for something which is unnamed in the text. Now, you look back at then, just before the flood story, the B'nai Ha-Elohim descend to the earth and mingle with the daughters of Adam. There is a stark contrast there, the sons of the Elohim and the Adam, the humans. And you go back even to the Genesis story of the Garden of Eden and the serpent character, who is never called the devil or Satan or Lucifer in the passage. That comes up 1,000 years later. It's attributed to him, and very loosely, I might add. But the character in the Garden of Eden, in the text, his name is Nakosh. Nakosh is the serpent character, and Nakosh, by definition, means trickster, bringer of chaos, bringer of knowledge, the bright shining one, the illuminator. And this bright shining one ties into the bright shining princes of heaven, who were referred to as the divine councils. So you've got these three passages in the Old Testament that all speak of the Elohim. I believe that Nakosh in the garden was one of the divine council, could very well have been Lucifer, but he is one of the Elohim, or one of the Watchers. And the story in the Garden of Eden is one of sexual encounter and impregnation, the tampering with of the bloodline of humanity from the very get-go, and it's all supported by everything that happens in the text. So I'm not just sucking it out of my thumb, but so basically what you have is when Eve births Cain and Abel, they are twins. But Cain is the first of the Nephilim. He is the son of Nakosh, and Abel is the son of Adam. And that's, by the way, a medical fact, that a mother can bear twins that are fathered by two different fathers or at different times. So I have twin daughters who are 21 years old. The day they were born, the doctor told me, did you know that Bryn was 10 days less developed than her sister Abby? And I said, well, what does that mean? She said they were just conceived 10 days apart. I said, I didn't know that was possible.
What about a reptile and a human together?
Reptile and a human together. Now, that's a theory. And it's a hypothesis. It's a notion. It has turned into a great alien mythos. And the whole reptilian thing really comes from the writings of David Icke, from the writings of Zecharia Sitchin, and from extrapolation of other bits of information. If you go back to the Anunnaki, in the Sumerian culture, there's nothing in the passage in their cuneiform texts that pulls them out as reptilian. You'll find reptilian statuettes that are attributed to the Anunnaki. But the closest thing I have found to any kind of serpentine attribution is the parallel story to the Genesis Garden of Eden story, and that is the story of the creation of primeval man by the Anunnaki. Enlil, the chief god of the Anunnaki, said, "We are tired of doing our own work, of digging our own trenches, of tilling our own ground, of mining our own resources. Let us therefore create primeval man to do our work for us." And he conscripts his brother god, Enki, who is also known in the Akkadian culture as Ea. So Enki Ea mates and works with the goddess, and I cannot remember her name off the top of my head, something like that. And they create primeval man, and who are enslaved to the Anunnaki to do their work for them. And eventually there is a human king in the Tale of Atrahasis, which is in one of these cuneiform texts. And he appeals to his god Enki Ea, who is the patron god of his city, Eridu, and says, "Please help us. Bend your ear to your servant and hear my cry and my plight, O my lord, and descend down and save us from this slavery." And that's exactly what Enki Ea does. Comes down with his mighty warriors, and he says, "I have heard your plight and I have heard your supplications, and I will help you." And he delivers the forbidden knowledge of the gods to the humans, leads them in rebellion, teaches them how to rebel, and they rebel from Enlil, and they win their freedom. And for this, he and his followers are all cast to the subterranean caverns of the earth to dwell forever as punishment. Now he, Enki Ea, at the time, dwelt in the great Abzu, the underground, the underworld sea, and he would come to the surface outside the city of Eridu, into the backwaters of the Euphrates River, and he would ride his boat with his boatsmen, oaring the way through, and he loved the place. And it was known as the Serpent's Marsh, or the Serpent's Den, because for obvious reasons. You go there today, it's still filled with serpents, water serpents. And it became known as the Serpent's Den. It became known, associated with his name, Ea, Enki Ea, Ea's Den, which became known as Eaden, which became known as Eden in the Genesis story. And if you start comparing these two accounts, the 1,500-year gap between the writing of them, you will find that whoever wrote the book of Genesis, and I believe it was Moses, and I believe he wrote it in between 1440 and 1400 BC, so about 1,500 years earlier, he borrowed these stories from the Sumerian culture. Look at the similarities. Over that 1,500 years, during the migration of mankind from the Fertile Crescent down into the Canaanite region, they brought their religions with them. Enlil, the chief god of the Anunnaki, became El of the Canaanites, and Elohim, El Shaddai, El Elyon of the Hebrews, of the Israelites. Enki, Ea, during this same migration of religion and thought, became known as Ea, became Yahweh of the Canaanite culture, and Yahweh, Jehovah, is what that word means, of the Israelites. And the stories where ancient man was set to dig canals, mine resources, and till the ground for the Anunnaki. In the Genesis Garden of Eden story, it says God created man and woman and placed them in the garden to till the ground and keep it for him. And then you have, of course, Enki coming down, rising up out of the serpent's den, giving the forbidden knowledge of the gods, and the humans rebel. In Genesis, it's a little different. You've got the serpent character, not coming out of a serpent's den, but the serpent character, Nakosh, one of the Elohim, delivering the knowledge of God to the humans, and the humans, in essence, rebelling against God and not winning their freedom, but winning eternal damnation as a result. And all the passages, the whole passage afterwards, just bears this all out. And I could go on for hours. But that's stories that you get about the reptilian mating with humans.
So it's just like a bad game of broken telephone.
It really is. You know, one thing to keep in mind is that Moses, and I know he was a real man. I know he existed in Egyptian history. I know that he wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. I believe that. There's not proof for it. I believe it. Keep in mind, the first 40 years of his life, he might have been Israelite by birth, but he was Egyptian through and through. And when the Bible talks about him fleeing Egypt after murdering an Egyptian taskmaster who he saw a Hebrew slave, it says he runs from Egypt because Pharaoh sought to take his life. And he goes to Midian and he marries the daughter of the pagan high priest in Midian. And now he's exposed to not just everything he brings with him from Egypt, all his religious training, all his military training, all his royal training, and I'm saying this all before providing you information why I think he had all of that. He now is exposed to the Sinaitic religions, to the Hebraic religions, the Canaanite religions, the Syrian religions, or the Sumerian religions. And this is when, if he is indeed 80 years old, when he has his epiphany, his spiritual contact from God for the first time, this is the first time ever he becomes a worshiper of Jehovah, is at that burning bush experience. But remember, he was the only one there, the only one who saw it, the only one to write about it. And this is what he used to carry him through his experiences.
Nowadays, those people get called crackpots.
Well, exactly. That's exactly what it is. I look at some person who says they had some, the Archangel Michael lives in my closet and he comes out every Thursday night and communicates with me. And I'm like, yeah, right. But, that's a crackpot to me. But who am I to say the Archangel Gabriel doesn't do that? I don't know for sure. I tend to gauge these people by their credibility as a person. I've heard some very incredible stories from very credible people, and that then lends credence to what they have to say for me.
Yeah.
If I have somebody tell me they saw a ghost who is also, a weirdo, I have a harder time believing that than somebody who is very credentialed or is very credible in other areas of life that has the same experience. That's gonna be different for me.
So you were getting into your new book there, really, just by chance there with the Exodus reality, right?
Yes, that's coming out this October. My co-author with that book was Dr. John Ward, who lives he's a British archaeologist over there in Luxor. And we had talked about this for about 2 years. I was writing the Nephilim book, and I was writing that chapter 5. And I actually encountered John Ward on Facebook, of all places, the Sirius Project. I don't remember where I first saw it, but I connected with him, and I said, would love to talk to you sometime. You're an archaeologist. I want to get your take on some things. And we talked about Moses and the Exodus and found we had these different theories. And he acted as a consultant for me on some of the Egyptological stuff in my chapter on Moses, as well as the Ogdode and a couple of other things in my first book. And we vowed that we would someday write a book on this together. And, of course, once Reptilians was done, about this time last year, I finished up Reptilians, and John and I were hot and heavy on this topic, and we approached my publisher, New Page Books, Michael Pye, my editor, and said, I said, John and I would like to write a book. I want you to meet John. You'll meet him at the Paradigm Symposium. And he loved the idea, and we hadn't written up a proposal. And we showed up, we met Michael at the symposium. We talked about it. John just charmed the socks off of Michael. And Michael was very intrigued. He says, write it up, guys. Send me a proposal. And we sent it to him, and it got approved, of course. They said this is a little different than the kind of books we write. But John and I said, look, we're writing about a biblical mystery, but this is not just a biblical mystery. This is an historical mystery. It's one of those earth mysteries that has a biblical tie-in, and that's the way we approached it. And I took a more or less biblical point of view, saying I think the Bible has efficacious history, and I think that we can substantiate things. And where you cannot establish, well, let me put it this way. There is absolutely zero historical proof to prove that Moses ever existed or the Exodus ever took place. However, there is secondary archaeological and historical data that makes the entire case plausible historically. And this is the basis by which we went. And when you start looking for the plausibility, you will start finding that there's a hell of a lot of evidence out there that suggests these things actually took place.
and you guys must have got along pretty good over that month and writing the book, because you're continuing on other projects now.
Yes, we are. We're doing some other things. We've got something I can't announce yet because we promised we'd launch this on somebody else's radio show next week, Cassidy O'Connor with KGRA Radio. And but let's put it this way. John and I had an amazing journey, an amazing adventure, an amazing expedition for a month in Egypt. Let me ask you fellows, what would you, if you had the opportunity to take that trip and see those things under the guidance of people who wrote about them and explored them, would that sound like an intriguing trip to you?
Yeah, I mean, put it this way. I spent a month in Egypt when I was 20 years old, traveling around with a bunch of, ragtag crew of people I had met on my journey, some Americans, just a bunch of kids, really. And we went all the way down to Aswan and back for a month. And I also spent 2 months in Israel, just near that mountain you were talking about in the Golan Heights there at a kibbutz. So for me, experiencing Egypt like that, which had a bunch of challenges along the way, logistical and all kinds of other things, I would love to see it along with some guys like you in a small, tight little group of 10 or 12 people, and you guys touring around and getting kind of the backstage kind of pass to all these sites, because there's so much to do there.
And let me just say, there might be an opportunity like that comes up 4 times next year. But
approximately.
Maybe 4 times, maybe not. And so John and I have some things we're working on together. We're starting to look at a new book together. We're not quite sure what our focus is yet, but we've got so many different topics that we're working on. Let me say also that I am working with an agent and a publicist right now to take my academic theories of Moses and the pharaohs surrounding him and convert that into a trilogy of fictional novels. And there's a high probability that that's going to be picked up somewhere along the way here. So that will be kind of fun, taking the things I wrote about and fictionalizing it, putting it into a fictional setting, filling in the gaps, telling narrative, having characters interact with each other. Maybe this is a really good time where I can share a little bit of information of just who I think Moses was.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And why I think this is who he was. Now, I, of course, hinge pin all of this on a biblical verse in the Old Testament.
I have my own theory, actually. I'll bounce that off you after we're done.
All right. Well, here's my theory. There is a verse in 1 Kings 6:1, which is during the reign of Solomon. There's dispute over whether Solomon actually existed or not. I believe he did, but there's still dispute over that. But the verse says, "And on the day that Solomon dedicated the temple in Jerusalem," this is Temple 1 by archaeological terminology, Temple 1 in Jerusalem, which we know existed, it was the 480th year since the Exodus. That's a hinge pin date. And that is also a rock-solid date, because Temple 1, while there's some dispute over it, is dated to the median date is 966 BC for the founding of that temple, give or take 3 to 7 years in either direction, which is not a big amount of time. So your margin of error is at best, at any time, 4 years. And so the Bible verse says this. Now, if you do your date from 966 BC, the median date, you end up at 1446 for the date of the Exodus by that verse. Now, if that history is to be trusted in the biblical account, you go back to 1446 in Egyptian chronology. And by the way, another one of the difficulties in dating anything in Egypt is the fact that there are 4 or 5 different chronologies of the kings that jump all over the board by 20 to 40 years. And so you could be off by 40 years on something, or 20 years by something, or off by a couple of years on something. And there are several different chronologies that date this. The accepted chronology is the Oxford chronology, even though there are others that have very efficacious points to them. This theory falls roughly within the Oxford chronology. You got to move things around a little bit and allow for some other things. But during this time, if the Exodus took place in 1445 to 1446 BC, And if Moses was indeed 80 years old at the time, you can backdate to 1526 or thereabouts as the year of his birth. Now, sitting on the throne at this time is a king named Tutmosis I. He had a daughter, a single daughter at the time in 1526 BC, and her name was Hatshepsut. And Hatshepsut, her title was Pharaoh's daughter. And if you go to the biblical passage, that's all they say about her. They say, and Pharaoh's daughter did this, and Pharaoh's daughter found Moses in the Nile. That's actually her title in Egyptian history. Now, if she is the woman who found Moses in the Nile, and by the way, even that passage is a little tainted. It doesn't say she floated him in a basket down the expanse of the river Nile. It says that she placed him in a basket, smeared it with pitch, and put him amongst the reeds on the bank of the river. And this is where Pharaoh's daughter found them. I found him, and I happen to believe that this was very well planned by Moses' mother. There are a lot of people out there that say, "Oh, this isn't true. It's obviously just another retelling of the Osiris myth." And how many figures in history, great figures, were floated down the Nile in baskets that predate Moses? Well, here's what I think. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that Moses' mother, his slave mother, did this by plan, by absolute playing into the mythology of Osiris. And she knew exactly who was going to be there at the bank of the Nile, and she had her daughter follow the basket down to that spot on the Nile, or bring it down, wading it through the shallows. And I believe this was a meticulous plan to have the daughter of the Pharaoh find this young baby in a basket and have her immediately latch onto the Osiris story, which was part of their religious mythology. And so this young woman, she's about 7 to 10 years old at the time in 1526, which would make her too young to be an adoptive mother. So what does the Bible say? She sent him back to his mother to be weaned, and about 4 or 5 years passes before she is old enough to claim him. Then he comes back to her and is raised in the palace the rest of his life. And I believe that this is a young man named Senenmut. She names him Senenmut. Senenmut is a historical figure in Egypt. He was the tutor to Hatshepsut's daughter, Neferuri. Now, keep in mind, tutors back then were not just school teachers or substitute teachers looking for a summer job. They were usually high royal officials. They were somebody who had military experience. They were grounded in the royal family. Now, Senenmut, his name, it says he was born of commoners in Egyptian history. Names the commoners, but doesn't say anything else about his family. It says that Hatshepsut named him Senenmut, which means, by definition, mother's brother. I, your mother, and also the mother of Egypt, am elevating you to the status of brother to me with the gods. So she names him Senenmut. She also bestows on this young man 92 royal titles. She makes him the grand royal architect of Egypt, and he builds her temple and other amazing structures. She names him the Grand Vizier of Egypt, which is basically second only to Pharaoh. He has all the power of the Pharaoh except the throne itself. She also names him the hereditary crown prince of Egypt. Now, keep in mind, he has this glorious history with Hatshepsut. He leaves behind 9 statues of himself, with him caressing the young Neferuri, holding her in loving embrace. His name was on the walls of her temple. His tomb, his big, glorious painted tomb, is out at the northwest corner of the complex of her tomb, of her temple, Deir el Bahri. He disappears completely from Egyptian history with no trace, no evidence, and no mention. No body in any of the tomb. He left behind 3 tombs, all of them unfinished, all of them unused. There's no body. There's no anything about his disappearance. And within a year, Hatshepsut dies. There's one thing he inscribed on the walls of one of his tombs. He refers to himself in his various royal titles, and he also refers to himself as the sole friend to the Queen Hatshepsut. He was very close to her. Now, he disappears, and you'll never guess the year he disappears. By the biblical chronology, Moses turns 40 in the year 1486 BC. Lo and behold, this is right around the same year that Senenmut disappears from the scene. And there is the story in the Bible that says that Moses murdered an Egyptian taskmaster. This is not so far-fetched when you think that those stories are embellished and they also leave out a lot of information. Perhaps Moses murdering the Egyptian taskmaster was nothing more than Senenmut, the grand royal architect, taking out a taskmaster that was part of the political party of Thutmose III, the deposed royal co-regent of Egypt with Hatshepsut. While he was 3 years old when her husband died, Thutmose II, and her stepson, Thutmose III, is the rightful heir to the throne, but he's only 3 years old at the time. So she becomes his co-regent, and within 6 years, completely deposes him, and she takes over as Pharaoh of Egypt and reigns for another 19, 20 years. And by the time that Thutmose is 23, she's made him the general of all her armies. Now, you would think that a man who has the armies has the throne, but he never forcibly took the throne from her. She was very loved by her people, but there was political factions, political infighting all throughout, and there was always the tit for tat, knocking off whom you can knock off. And after her death, it is said that Thutmose III, when he rose to the throne, that he was the one responsible for removing all her images from her tomb, her temple, from everything in Egypt. But we come to find out through more recent discoveries that it was really 40 years later, after he takes the throne, that his son, Amenhotep II, who I place as the Pharaoh of the Exodus, is the one that says, I am removing all her images. And you know who else's images he also removed at the same time? Senenmut's. And if you look at your chronology, if Senenmut, or Moses as I think he was, disappears the year that Hatshepsut dies, right around 1486 BC, and he's 40, and 40 years later, under the reign of Amenhotep II, the son of Thutmose III, who would have been the Pharaoh seeking his life. By the way, let me jump back before I get into that. Remember how the Bible says when Moses fled, he says Pharaoh was seeking his life for taking the life of this Egyptian taskmaster? I asked these guys in Egypt, these officials, I said, if there was a member of the royal house who murdered an Egyptian taskmaster over slaves, what would be the repercussion? And they both said, they kind of looked, raised their eyebrows and shook their heads and said, nothing. It would have been whitewashed. I said, so why was Moses' life being sought by the Pharaoh if he was indeed this man and was a royal prince of Egypt? And he kind of shrugged his shoulders. I said, do you think it might be because of the political infighting, the factions? Think of the court of Elizabeth I of England and how Robert Dudley, how the Duke of Norfolk and all these guys, were all these political factions trying to vie for her throne. This is exactly what was going on, but it was not overt. Otherwise, it would have been rebellion. They'd have been beheaded, and some of them were. Think of the same setting in ancient Egyptian history. Here's Hatshepsut with the deposed monarch leading the armies, but they have all this political factioning and infighting going on. What if, and this is pure speculation, but if Senenmut, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, if he is the chief architect and he got into some dispute with a taskmaster. Now remember, a taskmaster wasn't just necessarily the lowliest guy beating a slave with a stick. He may have been somebody set over hundreds of slaves and over hundreds of taskmasters. This may have been an official. And if he murdered that guy because perhaps it was one of Thutmose III's men, the political faction that was against Hatshepsut, this could be great grounds for Thutmose III to say, I'm gonna get this asshole. And I think this is what happened when Moses flees Egypt. Now he runs, and 40 years later comes back and says, let my people go. And it's with the son of Thutmose III who was taking his life. Remember what God said at the burning bush? Moses said, I can't go back there. Pharaoh is seeking my life. This is 40 years later. And so there's more to it than just simple being an official who murdered a taskmaster. There was more to this story that we're not told. And God says, all those who sought your life are dead. Go back. And he goes back to Egypt, and it's Amenhotep II. He leads the Exodus, destroys and sacks Egypt in the process. What does Amenhotep II do? He says, when his father, Tutmosis III, took the throne, there was a papyrus at his dedication. He had been deposed for some 20 years, and he talks about Hatshepsut, his stepmother, as that lying, deceitful bitch of a woman. And here's his son now saying, you started removing her images. I am going to finish the job for that lying, deceitful bitch of a woman. And her grand vizier, her hereditary crown prince, who fled when he murdered one of your guys, and he wipes out every one of Senenmut's images as well. And so these are circumstantial things. I get into all this stuff in the book. It's circumstantial, but it fits the time, it fits the picture, and it makes the story historically plausible. And this is who I think Moses was. He was this man, Senenmut. And I believe Senenmut was very closely tied to Hatshepsut. And when he flees, she's dead within a year.
Wow.
And it's an amazing story.
Yeah, you've got my mind spinning right now, trying to keep up with you and follow all this.
There's one thing I want to add to this. This is something I found, and I have to credit David Rohl with this information. I read it in an article that he wrote. He's an Egyptologist and has written a lot of books about biblical and Egyptian history. And he talks about, remember at the burning bush, that Moses says to God in the story, he says, after it's all said and done, and he's got to go, he says, whom shall I tell these people sent me? And God says, he basically says, it's none of your damn business what my name is, because I think he was looking for the private name of God. That's a totally different story. The way he phrased the question was, if you know the private name of a deity, you would have power over it. And he says, so whom should I say sent me? What's your name? And God basically says, none of your goddamn business what my name is. And he says, you tell them I am sent you. I am that I am, he says. And we always learn in seminary that that was a title for God. And he says, I am that I am they speak of. It was one of the titles used for God. Well, now, David Rohl had done some linguistic research into the I am. And while I can't quote it all, I quote him in my book and establish the case for this. But I found this blew my mind when I read this and looked into the linguistics and verified it. The I am being used there is Moses using a play on words. Now, remember I told you Moses was thoroughly Egyptian at this point. He's not a Yahweh or Jehovah worshiper. He's not a Jew. Judaism didn't exist till he created it. And now he's been in Sinai for 40 years, learning all these Sumerian religions and the Sinaitic religions, the Canaanite religions. And he had a play on words here when he used that I am that I am. What it literally means is this. That I am broken down linguistically relates to the old Sumerian for, guess what? Enki. So in essence, what God is saying, I am that Enki they speak of. And that blew my mind. Now, I don't know if God is saying, I am Enki, or if he's just saying, they speak of the God Enki, that's who I am. I'm the real God behind the false one. Right. I don't know if that's what's being said there. But I thought it was very telling that God in that story, and Moses wrote it, I am that Enki they speak of.
That was exactly my theory.
No.
Oh, hold on. I lost my headset. You can hear me, but I can't hear you. There we go. All right.
Okay, so what's your theory then, Darren?
That was pretty much it in a nutshell. I don't know if I want to get into it on the podcast. It kind of goes down the line of the L. Ron Hubbard sort of angle.
Sure.
Well, whatever. Who gives a fuck, right?
Yeah, get into it.
Yeah, well, I figure maybe after he got banished from Egypt or however it happened, he was, feeling kind of down, and he went into the mountains for 40 years and studied all these other ancient religions, and then maybe he figured, what the hell? Why don't I just go start my own religion?
Well, I think that's exactly what he did. I believe he founded Judaism on Egyptian religion and Sumerian religion and all these other religions that he came in contact with. You find, just in talking about the stories, as I mentioned, the Garden of Eden story, how that relates to the Sumerian story. He took and he altered the facts to fit and created Judaism.
And that pretty much sprung into the three major religions of today.
Yes. And a good example that I use in the book on the Reptilians, by the way, is Muhammad. And I say this with all due respect, not wanting a fatwa on my head, but Muhammad was a wealthy son of a family, and they had all these factional tribes of Arabs that were not united. And they all worshipped at Mecca, but they worshipped 360 different gods. And Muhammad had as a mentor, and this is historical fact, he had a Jewish man and a Christian man that were mentors of his. And they said, if you ever hope to unify these splintered tribes, you have to start by going monotheistic. You have to do away with polytheism. And so what he ended up doing, he took 359 of this pantheon of gods and discarded them.
And kept Allah.
And he kept Hamal, which he renamed as Allah. And he said, now Allah is our one monotheistic God. And he created Islam out of whole cloth to unify his people. And I think this is exactly what Moses did. He led the ragtag remnants of an enslaved Israelite people who had been in country for 400 years, many of those years as indentured, not indentured, as forced labor slaves, and he frees them. They don't give two shits about Moses, you can find as the Exodus goes on. They're out of there. Now, let me ask you guys a question. If you had seen and experienced under a charismatic leader the 10 plagues of Egypt, you'd seen the wonders of God displayed in full force, and it releases you from bondage. You're backed up against the Red Sea and the armies of Pharaoh descending on you, and your leader stretches his hand across the waters, and the waters part, as the Bible says, a wall on the left and a wall on the right. Which, by the way, there's also the little phrase that we gloss over a lot. It says, and Moses stretched the rod of God over the waters, and a strong east wind blew all night and dried the ground. And the waters, then they added, and the waters stood on the right and the left. And that you cross through that, and then you see those waters close on the encroaching army, and you're free. Would you a week later be building an idol to a golden calf?
Probably
or would you be
not.
worshiping the God that your leader said? Remember when Moses went up to the mountain and he left the people all down on the ground floor, and he's gone up there for 40 days. I believe, by the way, it was an active temple at that site. The temple of Hathor was at the top of Serebet el-Khadim. I believe Moses went up there to commune with these priests who were housed there. And if you go up there, the whole place is steles inscribed on both sides. They look like tall gravestones, ranging in size from a foot tall to 8 feet tall. And then you see these piles of thousands of years old ruins of these shards of these steles that were inscribed on both sides and broken and cast off in a pile. What does it say Moses did when he came down with the tablets of the law? It says it was 2 stele inscribed on both sides. And he comes down and they're worshiping the golden calf. But remember when he's up there, what did the people say? They said, now this is a vernacular translation. They say, where is this man Moses who led us out of Egypt? He's gone up in the mountain. Build us a god that we may worship him. And Aaron casts the golden calf. Now, in the vernacular, this translates, they're basically saying, hey, where is this guy Moses? He led us out, and now he's gone. He's been up in this mountain for 40 days. And they basically had no real connection to him. And they're complaining. You know why they're complaining? They have no connection to Moses. They have no connection to his God, Jehovah, or Yahweh. This is not their God.
They're just happy to get the fuck out of Egypt.
Right. They're happy to be out, except except they're moaning the whole time. Oh, we had leeks and onions by the Nile, and out here we have dirt to eat. We have no water, and they're doing all this complaining. You know why I think that is so? I think it's because the events that we read about, all these miracles, are perhaps a bit embellished. I think it actually happened. There were things that took place. And yet, I do not want to for a minute discount anyone's faith. I do not want to discount the miraculous powers of God. If God exists as he says he did he have the ability to do all those things? Sure. But the reaction of the people seems to indicate that they saw a lot less than the story of what we are told. And maybe they didn't experience it firsthand. But they walk out of there, and they're complaining right away. And so there's some very interesting stuff that goes on with those people. So Moses created Judaism out of everything that he knew and brought to the table. And the big question is this founded on proto-religion that existed prior to the Sumerians, and this is God, very God of the Bible? Or did Moses ascribe all these things to Jehovah? And that's the big question.
There's a lot of crossover with some ancient flood myths. I think I remember talking to you at Paradigm Symposium about them, and I did a bunch of research myself. And what are your thoughts on flood myths? How many did you say there were? So over 700.
There's over 600 that I know of, and I haven't read them all. But there's over 600 different flood accounts from antiquity, that ranging from major cultural stories, major religious stories, down to tribal stories. And that's how you get so many of them. But common to most of them is the element of a race that descended from the heavens or came from somewhere else, on non-human entities or spirit beings that impregnated human women and had offspring, and the major deity or the god or some higher power, more sophisticated power, was attempting to wipe them out. And the flood was the means by all these mythologies. So you have crossovers there. Now, we don't know which ones. If we step out of the box of Judeo-Christianity, we say that's just one of the stories. This is one of the accounts. And the big question of universal flood versus localized flood versus local to the area versus whatever it might have been. Those are the big questions. But of course, in order to do that, you have to step out of the box of the orthodoxy of Scripture, of God-breathed Scripture. And so that's where the problem comes in for those within those faith structures, which I come from. It's that we believe certain things by faith, and they're such magnificently glorious mythological tales that we don't realize how mythological they are until we step away from it for a minute and back at it. And I think that's where all these stories come, and they all correspond. And as I said to George Norrie, and I remember this, was on Coast to Coast last year on this topic, and I said, the one thing that is certain, George, I said, is that mankind went through some amazing interruption of the bloodlines very early on, from the get-go. And whether it be ancient alien or non-human entity or spirit beings or gods, this is what happened.
Have you done much research into Native American folklore or creation and spirituality?
Not too much. I dug into just one tribal story, the Lakota story of creation. And it talks about how the first man and woman, and they had a name. Their names I can't remember off the top of my head. There's something like Wawatunga or something like that. It had that ring to it. That they ascended up out of the subterranean caverns of the earth and saw the sunlight for the first time on the day of creation. And they had a daughter as the first child, and I don't remember her name, but she was fallen in love with by the god Iktope, who was the correlation to the serpent in the garden character. He was the trickster character, the bringer of chaos. And he impregnates the daughter, and she has, I think it's triplets. Something common, by the way, to most of these first family stories you'll find in different creation stories, that was the Lakota story in a nutshell, is that there were multiples either born to the children of the first family or to the first couple themselves, twins, triplets, quadruplets, quintuplets. And this is mentioned in all these different cases, mythological stories. And it's no different with Adam and Eve. They bore Cain and Abel.
Hey, I wanted to jump back to the Reptilian book for a bit.
Sure.
I've got this on my mind. I was visiting with a friend of mine, and she was telling me about her ayahuasca experience and how she actually saw a pretty big dragon's head, like right in front of her face. And then I didn't tell her, she didn't know at that time that I had sort of listened to a bunch of tales and been following some of this, people doing ayahuasca. And, Mike has been all over that too. And so you hear about these stories all over the world about people on hallucinogens, either, psilocybin or DMT, seeing reptiles or dragons. So I wonder how far back that goes. Like, could we even, surmise that Eden, the forbidden fruit of Eden, was a magic mushroom or something, and the snake was a massive hallucination? I mean, did you ever think about any of that while you're researching your book?
I sure did, because every culture seems to have some kind of serpentine representation.
Yeah.
You can go through the list and name off the major ones just in a heartbeat. But to surmise certain things, here is something that I've had to get into of necessity. When I am one of those guys who you could call a true believer, but I try to temper it with an academic approach. Mm-hmm. I have grown over weary with the surmising and speculation and, this is what I feel about spirit. And I only mock it to say, not that I don't believe it's genuine with some people, but that I would think the vast majority of people who say things like that and have experiences are nutcases. I even had the opportunity to talk to, when I was talking to Whitley Strieber last year, who wrote Communion. I had said to him, Whitley, you are a crackpot, you know that. And I said, you are somebody who has had an experience that is real to you, but nobody else had that experience. And because nobody else experienced that, you're the crackpot. And he kind of laughed at that, and he said, yeah, I guess so. And I said, I don't mean that in a derogatory fashion, but that's the way you are perceived by certain people, because that's your experience. Now, all these experiences, people who see ayahuasca, I can't even say it at the moment.
Ayahuasca?
Ayahuasca. People who see reptilians, people who see shape-shifting. I can't for the life of me say that they are wrong and that they're not seeing those things. However, I would dare say that you cannot base hypothesis on those anecdotal experiences. You could get 100 of those experiences, and the same thing will happen with the thousands of people who have seen ghosts. You still can't prove that there's a ghost. Mm-hmm. And it's the same way with this. That is not material that can be used to prove a case, because it's too right. And I hate to say that. I happen to believe a lot of these experiences are real, but you cannot prove the case on the basis of them.
Yeah, some people might be shocked that your book is not sort of like that David Icke style book where
right.
It is a sort of a balanced look at just the history of the reptilians. You're not saying that this is the case or that's the case.
Well, I started off the book differently than I ended it.
Yeah.
I was about, not very far into it when I said, you know what? There is so much BS out there. I can't trace that because there's no source point. You go to the internet and you'll find thousands of sites that tell the same exact story about reptilian race that came from another star system and settled here and bred here. You can't prove it. And most of these, not most, I haven't found a single site yet that does not, or a single account that does not, or that gives me source material. Where do you draw your sources? They don't. They extrapolate information from surmising, from their feelings about things, and so on. And that is the worst way to build a case. And so I had to, of necessity in this book, step out to the more mythological look at it and say what we see as alien mythos surrounding reptilians today, while it might be true and there might be something to it, there is no case for it that can be proven. Therefore, it has to fall into the realm of modern mythology. And I got some critics of the book that really were very unhappy with me. I don't know anything, and this is a bunch of bullshit that you write, blah, 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 blah. And because they wanted to hear more facts about reptilians, and they don't exist.
Yeah, it's hard to deny the connection, though, with people from all over the world and all different cultures seeing the same type of thing, right? Exactly.
This is where I said, like with the Nephilim in that book, I said, while there is no direct evidence that this happened, the what's the word I'm looking for? The overabundance of cultural tales that speak of these kinds of beings tells me that when you boil it all down, there's a common thread out there, and that there is a kernel of truth to the mythology. And so the same with the reptilians. I don't know where they came from. We have all this mythology placed out there. I don't find any ancient resource that says they came from the star system of Draco. I find that in modern translation, but I don't find that in any ancient text anywhere. Where do they get this material? Well, I channeled it through some alien, reptilian. It's like, well, thank you very much. Thanks for playing. Channeling somebody does not give me solid information. I might believe it's true, depending on the credibility of the individual who channeled, but then I have to say, is channeling a valid means to support historical and critical data? It's not.
Yeah, I'm not a huge supporter of channeling myself.
Me either.
I'm a little bit more on the believer side of that. I've seen some stuff live that it was pretty incredible. But
I can be a true believer very easily because I've seen a lot of weird shit in my life.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I appreciate your stance though, and how you straddle the fence. Like even though I'm probably a little bit more on the believer side than Darren, for example, I think we're both pretty much in the middle, and a small s skeptic or sort of a
yes.
But it's tough. Sometimes I wonder if it's easier just to jump on one side or the other, because sometimes I feel like if I'm a little too skeptical, I might limit my experience.
I got to tell you, I have had experiences that I can't write about and be accepted as a critical thinker.
Yeah.
They're my personal spiritual experiences. There's something that happened to me in Egypt that John knows about, and I cannot name the names of the people involved in this right now.
Right.
It's sensitive, and it's I haven't gotten permission to say names, but suffice it to say, you know who my candidate is for Moses. There was somebody who passed away recently, and it hit me very hard.
Yeah. And
I didn't know why it hit me as hard as it did, and I struggled with that for a while, and then I went off to Egypt a couple of weeks later, and I was told by somebody who is a shaman who is very credible in my book, and I trust this person implicitly. And they said, I think you and this person who passed away have a connection in Egypt. Mm-hmm. And he said, I believe that you may have even been connected, and here it is, past lives.
Yeah. And
if it wasn't this person who I trusted saying it, I would have thrown it in the bullshit can immediately. Because I hear so many people that say, especially of people who die, oh, we were connected. You were connected to him in a past life. That's why you're grieving. And to me, that's the bullshit can. because I can't prove it, I can't qualify it or quantify it. But so I go off to Egypt, and I'm standing at the tomb of Senenmut, and I'm all by myself. John and Maria had gone up to the main road. This is down. If you're facing Hatshepsut's temple, there's to the west in front of you, behind her temple, and to the north on the right side of you, there's these sheer cliff faces, craggy cliff faces, going up 100 feet and more. And down in the what would you call it? You're facing on the main road, facing the temple, and you look down in the land drops away, and then it rises up into the cliff walls. And that's where Senenmut's tomb is. So we went down in there. We're standing outside his tomb, and I stood there all alone for a couple of minutes, and I said out loud, rather nonchalantly, it was nothing. I wasn't trying to conjure anybody or anything like that. But I think I was lighting a cigarette as I said this, and I said, "So, Senenmut, are you Moses, really?" And I said, "Moses, are you Senenmut?" And out of left field, I was hit with this powerful, God, I can't call it anything but a force that nailed me. And I began weeping, this weeping just like as when this friend died. And it was uncontrollable. I'm standing there in the hot desert sun with my tears rolling off my face, dripping into the sand at my feet, just like a fountain. And I thought, this is unbelievable. I remember I actually said out loud, and pardon my language, but I said out loud, I said, "What the fuck?" And I said, "Why am I crying? Why is this affecting me this way?" And then I even said out loud, "Okay, what trick of my emotions is messing with my psychology right now that this is happening? I'm flailing my arms. I'm talking to no one." And every time I tried to turn away, this wave would hit me again, this emotion. And I could not gain control of it.
Wow.
And it took me a while, and I finally came up top, and there were John and Maria were over about 50 feet away over on the road with the government official who had taken us up to the Senenmut tomb, and up on the cliff face. And I turned my back to them, and I'm a guy. I didn't want everybody to see me crying and all puffy-faced and all of that. And so I turned back, and I walk over to the edge of this little cliff that drops down into the area where Senenmut's tomb is, and I was just standing there with my hands on my hips, and I pulled down my hat over my face a little bit, and just trying to regain. And when I looked down in there, it hit me again, and I'm standing there weeping, and I'm not sure why. And then, of course, I hear John coming over, and I go, "Oh, great, here we go." And he's saying something like, "Let's go get some coffee, old boy." And he comes up and he goes, "Oh, my." He looks at me and says, "You've had something happen." And he reaches up with his finger, actually wiped a tear off of my cheek with his finger. And it was kind of a tender moment there. And I said, "I'm okay." And I said, "It was weird." And he says, "Look this way." And I looked at him, and he snapped a picture of me. He was there for posterity. Scotty crying. And then, of course, Maria came over and kind of chided him mildly and said, "Scotty, you need to go back down there and ask for clarity." And she grabbed John by the arm, and they went off to have coffee. And I walked back down there, and I sat down there for quite a while. And I wrote about it, and stuffed my pockets full of Senenmut tomb sand, and brought that home with me. And now, fast forward to several weeks later, and I'm talking to the wife of this friend of mine who had died. And I said, I wanted to be very sensitive about this, but I said, I need to tell you about the way his death affected me. And I told her. And then I said, there's something else. I said, when I was in Egypt, I was told that there might be a connection. And I said, this didn't occur to me until after the fact. But then I told her about the experience at Senenmut's tomb. And she said, oh my, she said, I got to tell you something. She said, we were studying together the relationship between Senenmut and Hatshepsut for over before he died.
Wow.
And she said he also believed he was a reincarnation of Senenmut. If not the reincarnation, at least an overlapping energy.
Yeah, yeah.
And then she said, now, what day did this happen to you at Senenmut's tomb? And I picked up my journal. I said, it was Tuesday, February 4th, mid-afternoon. And she said, oh, my. She said, I happened to be somewhere, and his brother and I saw his apparition for a brief second, and he moved something on that same afternoon. And she said, the strongest sighting I've ever seen of him since his death. And And to me, that left me with more questions than answers, but it also answered some things for me on a non-academic level, on that purely, you know what I felt like? I felt like the movie version probably portrays this better, but remember the book and the movie Contact by Carl Sagan.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the movie, she's the scientist fighting the faith issue all the way through this movie, science versus faith. Then she has something that she has to accept only by faith because she can't prove it.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I felt I was at that moment. I felt I have hit an element of faith that I cannot prove, but I cannot deny it.
Yeah.
And so this, for me, established a spiritual, what would you call it, a synchronicity, a verification that I was on the right path.
Yeah.
And somebody was telling me so.
Amazing.
And and there's been many other things, spiritual things connected to that since, that just have me, as much as I like to play the academic in certain aspects, I am fully convinced that there is a spiritual realm that's at play here as well.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that 100%. I don't personally believe that it has to be written down in a book or anything like that, but I believe that everyone can find it kind of within themselves.
Why do you think these old patriarchs, when we think biblically, why were they always, after their spiritual experience, which we can read in 2 minutes in the passage about them in the Bible, they went for decades sometimes with never hearing from God again? And why were they always at such a quandary? Why did they make so many mistakes trying to make things happen? Because they were trying to play off of that one experience, that one epiphany. And they made mistakes along the way because of it. I think this is what we're all left with. I wrote a little article for Intrepid magazine at Christmas a couple years ago where I talked about Joseph and Mary and the birth of Jesus. And remember what happened in that story? This is just a rabbit trail that popped into my mind, so it's worth talking about. What happened in that story? She's pregnant, and it ain't his kid. And they're not married yet. They're betrothed, which by first century Judean Jewish custom was as good as marriage, just without the legalities yet. And they had to be betrothed for a year, and she comes up pregnant. And what does it say? Joseph has the right to haul her before the Sanhedrin or the Jewish court and possibly even have her stoned for adultery. But what does he do? It says he's gravely disappointed. It says, and he sought to put her away or divorce her from this betrothal privately. Now, I think that showed that he had a great love for her. What do people who love each other when they find out the other person cheated on them? Even if that person is asking for forgiveness and wants to keep the marriage going, what does that person do? They love them, but imagine that grave disappointment, that shaking of the chest that comes along when you realize that this betrayal took place to you and you try to compensate and overcome that. And many times people don't. It's such a break of trust that they can't go on and they divorce. Same thing happened with Joseph there. He's going to put her away quietly, but he doesn't want to make a public spectacle. I think it's also because of the embarrassment factor for him. But then, lo and behold, what happens? He has a dream one night. And who appears to him in the dream but the angel of the Lord, which is another name for God. And God says, don't be afraid to take Mary as your wife. The child is mine. And he's the Messiah. And he wakes up with this glorious resolve that his wife is now bearing the Messiah, the long sought after Messiah. And I can imagine Joseph waking up in the morning with this amazing dream, and he's on cloud nine. God just spoke to me. And by the time he's poured his first cup of coffee and he's standing in front of his unshuttered window watching the sunrise, scratching his hairy ass, sipping at his coffee, going, now, oh, wait a minute. Was that really God that spoke to me, or was that just a dream? And so you know what Joseph did? He acted by faith. He said, I'm going to operate as if that was a true thing. And I don't think God ever spoke to him again. I think there's something that God told them to flee to Egypt when the baby was small, and so on. But this is a guy who operated when his natural defense against the unknown probably told him, flee from that. Mm-hmm. And yet he operated by faith. So I think this is what we do with all this stuff. is reptilians, Nephilim, Moses, the Exodus, the plagues. We look at all this stuff and we say, I can believe that stuff, but wait a minute. And did Moses do the same thing? Did he? Do you know why? Remember, Moses was not allowed to go into the Promised Land 40 years after the Exodus because he kept equating himself with God. He kept saying, "Why do we have to do this for you?" He elevated himself to the status of, guess what? Think Pharaoh, brother of the gods. What was Sennamet called by Hatshepsut? Mother's brother, you are now an equal with me as a brother to the gods. This is why in Nephilim I call the chapter about Moses the Pharaoh god of Israel. I think that he was establishing himself. There was a passage where it says, and Moses, and God descended on Moses' tent like a cloud and spoke to Moses face to face as a man talks to his friend. But then 9 verses later in the same chapter, Moses writes, but no man can see God's face and live. What's that contradiction all about? Yeah. I don't think it was a contradiction at all. I think Moses was saying, no man can see God's face and live, but I've seen God's face and converse with him as a friend. You know what he was establishing there? From all his training in the royal courts of Egypt, I am the Pharaoh god of Israel. I am more than a man. I am a brother to the God. That's why I do not die, but you will. So all of this stuff, this bears with, was Moses actually communing with God, or did he make it all up? We don't know yet. Did he have an experience? Was he a madman? Did he at 80 years old have this epiphany and said, this is it? Yeah, and he believed it? Did it really happen? We'll never, ever, ever know unless we meet God someday.
Or build a time machine.
That's my next thing. Man, I want a time machine. I wouldn't go back to change time, the whole butterfly effect thing and yada, yada, yada. You step on an ant in Egypt and suddenly, there's no America. Or something like that, But if I had a time machine, I'd like the ability to go back in invisibility or undetectable. And I'd take pictures.
Yeah, and just watch.
Yeah.
I'd go into the future, I think.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
But I suppose we're almost out of time here. I'd like to really thank you for coming on, Scotty. It's been a great chat.
Well, I sure appreciate you having me, letting me just blether on.
Oh, it's great. I mean, I just I had some questions, but I just wanted to let you keep going there. I mean, it's just fascinating stuff.
It's fascinating even for me. That's why I like to talk about it.
Yeah. And I can't wait to see you again in October.
October at the Paradigm Symposium, the 17th through the 20th. If you like this kind of stuff, your listeners, you know what? Go to our site, paradigmsymposium.com, or just go to intrepidmag.com and click on the Paradigm Symposium link. We got tickets up for sale now. We got a phenomenal cast of speakers. If you like this kind of stuff and you think this way and you want more of it, come to the Paradigm Symposium. Darren himself can tell you what kind of an experience it was.
Yep, it was a fantastic time. I can't wait to come back this year. If everything goes according to plan, I should be there as well. And actually, I'm pretty sure there's a link to Paradigm Symposium 2013 right on the Grimerica homepage.
Oh, fantastic! And by the way, we're doing it at a new venue this year. We are not going to be at the Hilton DoubleTree.
Oh.
We're lining up hotels downtown St. Paul as we speak. We're a place that is the old St. Paul Union Depot. It's the old train station.
Oh.
A big marble building with the big colonnades outside and pillars and marble hall, and with a big vaulted ceiling running down this place. And that's where we're doing the whole event this year, and it's going to be pretty amazing.
That's great. Yeah, I like that being downtown. If you need a break, you can just walk around, or you can go.
The only drawback, quote unquote, might be that our hotel is not on the same facility, but it's minutes walk or minutes by cab up just a few blocks up from the hotel. There's hotels all around. We're working on contracting a particular hotel right now. I'll announce that when we have it contracted. But there are also restaurants all around. There's places we are right there it's actually an operating depot for Amtrak is coming in there, and also the the Minneapolis-St. Paul Metro Transit. The train will run you all the way out to the airport and to the Mall of America and all these different places around the city. So it's actually a very cool location.
Will you be serving drinks?
Absolutely.
I like your style.
Way on the far end of the depot and around the corner in this big atrium, and it's blocked off by doorways and stuff. But you go through there, and there's the company that is most likely, we are just working on contracting with them now, actually catering our event, Christos. It's a Greek restaurant and bar, and I of course, gauge the efficacy of any good bar by the scotches that they have on their shelf. If they only carry Johnny Walker Red, they are a poor bar. But they had several of the single malt Highland scotches I like Balvenie and Dalwhinnie and Oban and Macallum. And I looked at that and I said, you guys have a bar. So that's down there. And we'll be doing the same type of thing as last year. We're going to have the banquet catered right there. It's either going to be on that main ground room, and they'll reset it up, or they're giving us, if you stand in this vaulted ceiling atrium, which is the length of a football field and more, and we're going to have all our vendors right there in the same room, by the way, as well. You look back above it at the far end, and there's these arched windows that fit the vaulted ceiling. That's the second floor room, the banquet room, and I think that's where we're going to have the banquet in this hall this year. If not there, it'll be just down on the main floor. So,
no, that's great. So, how else can people get a hold of you?
It's a pretty cool location. You can get a hold of me at my personal website, scottallenroberts.com. Allen is A-L-A-N, so scottallenroberts.com. Through intrepidmag.com. You can get a hold of me all there. You can find me on Facebook. I think I'm Mr. Scotty Roberts or something like that.
All right.
And for the Exodus page, we've got a group page up over at it's facebook.com/groups/Exodus book. And you can find John and I there.
All righty.
And we'll have all of that linked in the show notes for sure. So anyone listening can just go to the show notes for this episode and just click there, and it'll take you all to every place Scotty just mentioned.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Scotty. It's been really good chatting with you.
Thanks for having me. I sure appreciate it.
And that was our chat with Scott Allen Roberts of Intrepid Magazine, Paradigm Symposium. The list goes on and on and on. What a great chat. We ran longer than ever because it's just hard to stop. It's so interesting.
It's great.
Yeah. Scotty's a great public speaker. I can't wait to hear him speak at the Paradigm Symposium this year. As usual, of course, we'll have all that linked in the show notes.
Yeah, I didn't really get too much Bible experience when I was younger. Like, I went to Sunday school a bit, so some of that stuff is hard for me to keep up with. But it's good to hear some of his own experiences there too in Egypt. Yeah,
it was a great talk, and of course we had RPJ before that. I do want to apologize for a bit of the quality on the intro. We had some major Skype problems with our connection, so we were going through some flooding here at the time in Calgary, so I'm pretty sure that had something to do with it. So I apologize for that. I did the best I could with it, and hopefully now that the scene is cleared up here in Calgary, we won't see any more of those. I know we had a great connection tonight, so.
Yeah, and we've got Robbie Graham coming up in a few days, so we should be able to get that out pretty quick.
Yep, yeah, we'll have Robbie Graham next week, and then after that'll be Dennis McKenna.
Oh, that'll be a good one too.
Yeah, and then we'll have Nick Redfern eventually. We haven't worked out the logistics of it yet. And of course, as usual, you'll find links to everything in the show notes. Graham will get those ready for you guys.
Thanks.
Yeah, I do the editing. Come on, it's fair deal.
All right. Well, it's been great chatting with you again. This was a wonderful night, and I'm looking forward to joining you again soon.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks for coming. Big thanks to RPJ and Scotty Roberts again, and we'll see you next time with Robbie Graham. Have a good one, guys.